The lawyer's pen scratched against the paper like nails on a coffin. Each stroke felt like I was burying my own children, but maybe that's exactly what they needed. I'm 82 years old. My hands shake when I pour my morning coffee and my back aches when I bend to feed the cat. But my mind is sharp as the day I gave birth to my first child 58 years ago, sharp enough to see what I had created. Monsters. I had raised monsters. You probably think I'm some bitter old woman sitting alone in a dusty house, plotting revenge against ungrateful children. You'd be wrong. This isn't about revenge. This is about salvation, theirs and mine. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was always my grocery day, and I was standing in the cereal aisle when my phone rang. It was my daughter Sarah, my oldest, the responsible one, or so I thought. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances," she said, her voice sweet as artificial honey. "David and I have been talking, and we think it's time you move somewhere safer. You know, with people your age. People my age." As if 82 meant I was already dead. "I'm fine where I am, sweetheart," I told her, gripping my shopping cart until my knuckles turned white. "But Mom, that house is too big for you. Think of all the equity just sitting there. We could help you find a nice assisted living facility." There it was. The real reason. Not my safety, not my comfort, the house, the money. I hung up right there in the cereal aisle, between the Cheerios and the regret I'd been swallowing for years. That night, I sat in my husband's old chair, the one that still smells like his aftershave even though he's been gone 3 years now, and I thought about my children. Really thought about them. Sarah, 42, married to a man who sees dollar signs when he looks at me. 2 kids she barely spends time with because she's too busy working 60-hour weeks to afford a lifestyle she thinks she deserves. David, my baby at 38, still calling me for money every month. Just to get back on my feet, Mom. Always just to get back on his feet. But somehow he's been falling down for 20 years straight. And Michael, the middle child, who only calls on holidays and birthdays, and even then it feels like he's checking items off a to-do list. Where had I gone wrong? I'll tell you where. I had made their lives too easy. Every stumble, every failure, every consequence, I had cushioned it with my checkbook. Failed a class? Private tutor. Wrecked a car? Here's a new one. Lost a job? Don't worry, Mom will help with rent. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought love meant never letting them struggle. But struggle is what makes us human. It's what teaches us the weight of our choices, the value of effort, the price of dreams. I had stolen all of that from them. I had created 3 middle-aged children who still expected Mommy to fix everything. The calls started coming more frequently after that Tuesday. Sarah wanted to discuss my future. David needed help with his mortgage. Michael thought I should downsize for my own good. None of them asked how I was feeling. None of them asked what I wanted. I was a bank account with a pulse, and the pulse was starting to weaken. That's when I made the appointment with my lawyer, Harold Peterson. He'd drawn up my will years ago, back when I still believed my children were just going through phases. Good people who'd eventually grow up. "You want to do what?" Harold asked, his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. "Cut them out. All of them. Everything goes to charity." "Mrs. Patterson, are you sure about this? This is quite drastic." Drastic. Maybe. But sometimes drastic is what love looks like when you've been doing it wrong for 60 years. I didn't tell them right away. I waited. I watched. I gave them chances to surprise me, to show me that somewhere underneath all that entitlement and expectation lived the children I thought I had raised. Sarah showed up with real estate brochures. "Look at these lovely places, Mom. Some of them even have pools." David brought his wife and kids over, but spent the whole visit taking pictures of my furniture, my jewelry, my antiques. "Just for insurance purposes," he said. Michael didn't even show up. 6 months later, I called them all together. "Family dinner," I said, like old times. They came, of course, probably wondering what I was going to give them this time. The dining room felt smaller with all of us there, or maybe we'd all just grown too big for it. "I have something to tell you all," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "I've changed my will." You could hear the air leave the room. Everything, the house, the savings, the investments, all of it, is going to charity when I die. You're not getting a penny." Silence. The kind of silence that comes before storms. Then Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. "Mom, you're being dramatic. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life." David's face went red. "You can't do this. We're your children." "Exactly. You're my children. Not my investors, not my retirement plan, my children. And I failed you as a mother by never letting you learn to stand on your own." Michael just stared at his plate. "How much?" he asked quietly. "How much what?" "How much are you giving away?" I told him. The number hung in the air like smoke. That's when the yelling started. The accusations, the threats, words I never thought I'd hear from the babies I'd rocked to sleep, the children I'd sung lullabies to, the teenagers I'd worried about every night they were out past curfew. They called me cruel, vindictive, a bitter old woman who'd lost her mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was what losing your mind looked like. Finally seeing clearly after decades of willful blindness. They stormed out that night, all three of them. Slammed doors, screeching tires, the whole dramatic production. I stood at my kitchen window and watched their taillights disappear into the darkness, and for the first time in years, I felt light, free. Weeks passed, then months. The phone didn't ring. No one came by. It was like I'd erased myself from their lives by refusing to be their ATM anymore. But then something strange happened. Sarah called. Not about money. Not about the house. She called because her daughter, my granddaughter Emma, had asked why Grandma never came to her soccer games anymore. "I told her you were busy," Sarah said, her voice small. "But she said that was silly. She said grandmas are never too busy for soccer games." Out of the mouths of babes, we started talking, really talking. Not about my money or my house or my future, about Emma's games, about Sarah's job stress, about how she felt like she was drowning in debt and expectations and the life she thought she was supposed to want. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me one evening, "about never learning to stand on my own. You're right. I'm 42 years old and I still call you every time something goes wrong." "Sweetheart." "No, Mom, you were right to cut us off. We weren't your children anymore. We were parasites, and I hate that. I hate what we became." That conversation broke something open in me, something that had been frozen for years. David came around next. It took him longer. Pride, maybe, or shame, but he came. He'd gotten a job, a real job, not one of his get-rich-quick schemes. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work, and for the first time in years he looked me in the eye when he talked. "I'm not asking for money," he said. I wanted you to know I'm trying, really trying this time." Michael was the holdout. Michael, my quiet middle child, who'd always been the hardest to reach. He showed up on Christmas Eve, almost a full year after that horrible dinner. He looked older, thinner, but there was something different in his face. Something I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. Vulnerability. "I've been angry at you for months," he said, standing in my doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged there. "But I've also been thinking about what kind of man I am, what kind of son I've been." We talked until sunrise that Christmas morning, about his childhood, about the choices he'd made, about the man he wanted to become versus the man he'd been. "Thank you," he said as he was leaving. "For what? For loving me enough to let me fall." That's when I knew I'd done the right thing. 6 months ago, I had the will changed again. Not back to the way it was. They don't need my money anymore. But I set up education funds for my grandchildren, and I'm leaving each of my children something small. Not because they need it, but because they've earned it. Sarah runs her own consulting business now, small but growing, and she loves the work. David's been promoted twice at his job and just bought his first house, with his own mortgage, his own down payment, his own sweat equity. Michael went back to school, became a teacher. He says it's the first time work has felt like purpose instead of punishment. They call now. Not for money, just to talk, just to check in, just to be my children again instead of my dependents. Last week, we had another family dinner. Same dining room, same table, but everything was different. We were different. "You know," Sarah said, passing the mashed potatoes, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For cutting us out of the will, for forcing us to grow up, for loving us enough to make us hate you for a while." David nodded. It was the best thing you ever did for us, Mom. The hardest thing, but the best thing. Michael just smiled and squeezed my hand. I'm 82 years old. My hands still shake when I pour my morning coffee, and my back still aches when I bend to feed the cat. But my heart is full in a way it hasn't been in decades. I have my children back, the real ones, the ones who can stand on their own 2 feet and love me not because they need me, but because they choose me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go. Sometimes you have to break something completely before it can heal properly. I cut my children out of my will, and they thanked me for it. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't money, it's the strength to live without it.